Welcome back to Who's Behind Your Mask, this series where we're talking about masks. And it might be tempting to think we're talking about the kind that maybe you've had to wear over the course of the last year. But the truth is, what we're talking about are the masks that we've been wearing for longer than the last year. The masks that we've created over the course of decades to kind of hide parts of ourselves and to present in a way that feels appropriate in the world. And so we want to invite you to join in on this conversation and get ready to get a little honest. Last week, if you didn't catch it, you're gonna wanna make sure to go back and watch, but we talked about the layers of self-identity that we create, the things we put in front of us so that nobody actually has access to the parts of us we don't even want to acknowledge. And we talked about how important it is to give access to God to those parts of your life. This week, we're going to talk about what it looks like to give that also to the people around us. How do we invite people in to the parts of us that we are struggling with? And so it's going to be a great conversation. Before we jump too far, we want to make sure you know throughout this month, we are reading through the book of Proverbs. If you didn't know, Proverbs has 31 chapters and there's 31 days in August. So it's a perfect opportunity to just pick a chapter a day. In fact, you could just start with today. I think today's the 8th. Right? And so just start on chapter 8. If you want to follow along in the reading guide, you can find out more at ehills.org/weekend. But super grateful to just continue into this conversation. I want to just start by going to God because he's going to do some incredible things in us today. Will you pray with me? God, thank you. Thank you for who you are every single day. You are constant and you are good and you are powerful and you are strong. And even though we waver in who we are, we can be sure of you. God, today, will you speak into our hearts and our minds? Allow us to come face to face with who we really are and who you want us to be. And help us really take a good look at the people we surround ourselves with. God, thank you. Thank you for being here. In your name we pray. Amen. So about a decade ago, I worked at a church in Anaheim, California. And Anaheim, California is known for one thing: Disneyland, right? And so as a youth pastor, I decided one year I was going to get the infamous Disney pass. Now, before you think I'm too fancy or just, rolling in the dough or something, let's just be very clear. It was $20 a month back in the day for a SoCal pass. And I was living on an air mattress on my friend's floor because I couldn't afford rent. So priorities, okay? But the truth is, part of the reason I wanted a Disney pass was so that I could hang out with students, go grab lunch, go on a ride. It was an amazing opportunity to just do life on Main Street. Well, one of these students in particular, her name's Kelly. Kelly had a season pass since she could remember, since she was a young kid. And by the time I got my pass, she was about 16 years old. And so she made it her mission to go to Disneyland literally every other day. She would just drive after school from Huntington Beach down to Anaheim, and she'd go for an hour, 3 hours, 5 hours, and she'd just hang out at Disneyland. But she didn't just hang out at Disneyland. She decided she was going to join in this experiment. What she did was she found a fanny pack. Now, fanny packs are awesome. Maybe a weird thing to have 10 years ago. So she found a fanny pack and she put on a fake British accent and she walked into Disneyland as if that was her. So Kelly every week would come back to youth group and tell me stories of who this fanny pack fake accent girl was at Disneyland. The problem was, one day she wandered into the magic store on Main Street. Yes, there's a magic store at Disneyland on Main Street. I don't really know why, but Walt wanted it, so Walt gets what he wants. So she would go to this magic shop, and it was a bunch of guys that worked there that were like 18, 19, 20 years old, and she became friends with them. So she comes back and tells me the story. She's like, Kelsey, I just met a bunch of these guys and we're friends and I'm going back tomorrow and we're gonna hang out and we're gonna do life together. And she was so excited. The problem is she was wearing her fanny pack and her fake accent. And the stories started getting more and more elaborate. Pretty soon she had invented parents who lived in the UK, and her older sister was going to school in Cambridge. And there was just like this whole elaborate spiel on how she ended up in the US for that season. And it was funny stories, and as a youth pastor, I was a little conflicted, should I tell her? you're lying to these people, or should I just let it go? And so I just laughed along. And one day she's like, Kelsey, why don't you come to Disneyland with me? And I was like, cool, that's great. I'm just gonna let you do your thing, and I'm just gonna feel conflicted over here. And so we go to Disneyland, and she stops me at the front gate. She says, so here's the deal. I told them about you. I was like, cool, they know your youth pastor. That's awesome. You're not ashamed of me. And she's like, no. I told them that you're my older sister in Cambridge's roommate, and you're also from the UK. Awesome. So I wander into Disneyland now going, do I lie with her? Do I go against this whole story and ruin this image? And I went along with it for the day, and I'm not sure if that was the right judgment call, but that's what I did. But here's my question for us. You may not have a fanny pack and a fake accent, but how many of us do the same thing? How many of us have created identities to be liked or to be seen or to be noticed in the world? And then all along the way, we're asking the people closest to lie along with us. How often do we step into situations and put on an identity that feels safer for us, but all the while really understanding that nobody can truly love us if we're not us? Why settle for likes when you can experience love? That's what Kelly did. She wanted the likes. She wanted people to notice her, to see her, and she settled for these likes, this group of guys at the magic shop who would cheer her on instead of actually being loved for who she is. And I think for a lot of us, we understand because we cultivate our lives and our lawns for the likes, but it really just leaves us lonely and tired. And I think it's time for us to change that narrative. I think it's time for us to invest in relationships in a way that we can actually be loved for who we are and put down some of that facade. The good news is throughout this series, Solomon is giving us wisdom through the book of Proverbs, and he has a lot to say about relationships and about how we conduct ourselves in those relationships. Throughout the book, he's going to kind of give us this difference between wisdom and foolishness, and within relationships, we see wisdom and we see foolishness. We see wisdom in showing up as who we are, and foolishness in showing up as someone else. So how can we wade through that? Well, it starts by choosing wisely. Choose wisely the people that are close to you. Choose wisely the people that get access to who you are. Now, my guess is most of us in this room are one of two kinds of people when it comes to how we choose to include people in our world. Some of you tell everybody everything. Maybe not the greatest idea in all situations. Others of us maybe tell nobody anything. Well, these two extremes are not helpful. So how do we choose to not invite everybody in, but how do we choose to let somebody in to experience the real parts of who you are? How do we undo some of these rhythms of how we choose friendships to decide on the right people? Well, this is where Solomon comes in. In chapter 13, verse 20, he says, whoever walks with the wise becomes wise, but the companion of fools will suffer harm. Whoever walks with the wise will become wise. Okay, this is pretty simple, right? If you hang out with wise people, you become wise. If you hang out with foolish people, you become foolish. And we know this because those of you that are out here as parents have maybe said the line, you're gonna become who you surround yourself with. Or maybe you've heard that from your parents. Or maybe you're the parent that says the next one, the show me your friends and I'll show you your future. We say this to our kids all the time because we've seen how they become the people that they're around, but it's no different when we're adults. We do the same thing. How many times have you been in a conversation and some mannerism comes out and you're like, oh, that was so-and-so from work. We do it in little ways, but we don't realize that the people that we keep closest to us are creating us, are forming us to be the people that we are going to be. Which begs the question, do you like who your friends are outside of your relationship? Are they people that conduct themselves well in the world? Because that's who you're going to become. If you look at your group of friends and you go, ooh, I don't like what they're doing, and then you jump in anyway, you are going to become more and more like them. The people that are closest to you are going to have an impact on how you conduct yourself. He continues, if you go a few chapters later in chapter 27, verse 17, it says, iron sharpens iron, and one man sharpens another. The reality for us that we may not always want to accept is that the people that we are closest to, the people that we rub shoulders with, they're going to slowly start pruning us and creating us to be someone else. And it's supposed to be that way. The people that are closest to us are supposed to create us. They're supposed to push us. They're supposed to mold us. But if the person that you're rubbing shoulders with closest is not someone that you really want to be, then as you guys rub shoulders, you're going to turn into someone more like them. But there's a flip side to it. It also means you're going to have an impact on them. You are also going to give back into their lives. You're going to sharpen them to be more like you. Are you okay with that too? When we choose wisely, we have to think about the people that we're going to do life with, the people that we give access to the closest parts of us. When you allow the closest parts of you and the closest parts of them to come together, will it produce something good? Choose wisely those who you are going to allow access to your hearts. Just think about your friends for a moment. Do you like them? Do you like them outside of when you're hanging out together? Do you trust them? Do you trust that they care about you, not just what you do? Take an assessment of the people that are closest to you, because my guess is there have been seasons of our life where we have given access to people that shouldn't have access. For me, I think about my freshman year of college. You know, up until post-high school years, you become friends with whoever's close to you, right? You're in class with them, or you're in a sport team with them, or you're at youth group with them, and those become your closest friends, the people you do life with. You don't really have to think about it. It just happens. Then after high school, you get booted into the real world, and you have to figure out how to make friends. No one actually teaches you how to make friends in the real world. And so I get to college, and the only thing I know to do is just find whoever's closest to you. So I did that. I found my roommate, and she's amazing. She's doing some incredible work in Anaheim. Like, I'm just in awe of who she is. And we became best friends for a season. Well, we did then the same thing. We needed more friends. So we found the people that were closest to us in proximity and became best friends with the people across the hall. Well, they're great people, and I love them, and I care about them, but who they were was not who I wanted to become. And it didn't take long for me to figure that out. Every other night or so, we'd go to this coffee shop just down the street at like midnight, because that's what I did in college. I drank coffee at midnight. Some of those habits haven't completely left me. And so we'd go to this coffee shop, and it would take minutes for them to start looking down their nose at the people around them and to just bash whoever didn't come with us that night. In fact, to this day, I feel weird about ordering hot chocolate, and I love hot chocolate. It's a secret about me. Okay, now you know. But I feel bad about it because I ordered it once at this coffee shop because I didn't want coffee at midnight, and they were like, "You got a kid's drink?" And to this day, I can hear the tone in their voice. And I began to realize over the course of the year, I was that way. I was becoming more and more judgmental, and I was thinking that I was better than other people, and I started to recognize, like, I know that they're talking about people with me there, so I guarantee they're talking about me when I'm not there. I don't want to be a part of that. The paranoia, the frustration, me becoming someone that I was never meant to be. And so I had a decision to make. I could either keep going in hopes that things would change, or I could make a change. So I almost didn't even want to come back my sophomore year because of all of the stuff going on with this group of friends, but I did. And as I came back my sophomore year, I moved them out a couple layers. Instead of giving them access to the inner parts of me, I said, "You fit out here, and that's okay, and I love you, and I care about you, and you still get some pieces of me, but I'm not going to give you access to all pieces of me. And I'm gonna make room for people who are good for me to step into that space." And I began to choose wisely who got inner access to the layers of my life. Maybe it's time for a change in your life. Don't wait. I know we think, well, maybe they'll change, or maybe they'll grow out of it, or maybe it's just a season, but maybe it's okay to move people out of that inner circle into the inner parts of your life, into the outer parts, and say, I'm gonna make room for some people who are better for me, because if you show me your friends, I'll show you your future. You don't have time to sit and go, well, they may become the people that I wanna become one day. It is okay to move people out of the inner circle and move other people in. Because why settle for likes when you can experience love? Why settle for the kinds of relationships that you get paranoid about drinking hot chocolate when you can experience love where someone cares deeply about you? And it's hard. It requires a change. It requires an honest assessment of the people you keep closest to you and an honest assessment of how you're impacting the people around you. But once we start choosing wisely, once we start inviting the right kinds of people in, suddenly the voices that enter into our life become more important. They become more valuable, which is what leads us to the next step, which is to listen earnestly. Once you've chosen the right people, listen earnestly. Open your ears to the advice of the people that are closest to you, the people that see your inner parts, the people that see your heart, the people that know the deep, dark stuff that you don't let everybody know. We need to hear from them. And if we need to hear from them, then we need to stop talking and just listen, because they have good things for us. In fact, Solomon puts it this way in chapter 15. He says, without counsel, plans fail, but with many advisors, they succeed. We get kind of a military or a government or a business reference, right? If you build a plan and you want to carry it to action, but you don't let anyone else see it and you don't let anyone else speak into it, you have blind spots and you will miss things. Invite voices into your life. And then he continues at the end of the chapter, he says, the ear that listens to life-giving reproof will dwell among the wise. Whoever ignores instruction despises himself, but he who listens to reproof gains intelligence. Do you want to become a wise person? Do you want to grow in your understanding of the world and of yourself? Do you want to look more and more like the version that Jesus wants you to be every single day? Then you need to allow people to speak into your life and you need to listen to them. Give permission for people to say things to you because they're going to help. They're going to offer assistance. They want to walk alongside you and they have some really good things to say. But we have to be willing to listen or they're gonna stop giving us advice. The interesting thing about listening is a lot of times we think about the opposite of listening as talking. It's actually not the opposite of listening. The opposite of listening we've seen firsthand over the course of the last year. The opposite of listening is isolation. When someone says something to you and you don't wanna hear it, the opposite is actually just to cut them off and not listen at all anymore. To remove them from that season or that part of your life, to divide them from who you are and who you're becoming. The opposite of listening is saying, I don't want your voice in my life at all. And over the course of the last year, we've watched ourselves do it, partially not because we had a choice. We've had to isolate, we've had to remove ourselves from situations, but in doing so, we're disconnecting ourselves from the very voices we need to hear. And when we do that, then we start talking real loud and we don't know what we're talking about anymore. For me, I think about post-college, right? So freshman year, I made some poor choices on friends and again, love those people, but they're not part of my inner circle. And then the rest of college, I invited some new people into my life. Some people who spoke love into my world. Some people who helped me see me the way God built me. And it was awesome. I had some great friends. Well, towards the end of college, I started to make some choices personally that were destructive. Started doing things that were less than healthy, less than stellar. And my friends, because they loved me, began to speak up. They began to say, hey, Kelsey, we're worried about you. We see these things and we want to talk about it. We want to help you. And as someone who didn't listen, I did the opposite and I cut them out and they didn't even notice. I just slowly started disappearing from social circles. I slowly just pushed them away from me. I isolated to the point where when I graduated from college, my friends all got married and I wasn't invited to a single wedding. Why? because I just stopped talking to them. It wasn't vicious, it wasn't mean. I just cut the world off from around me to the point where even to this day, I don't have friends from college. Because the opposite of listening is isolation, and we've become experts at isolation. And even Solomon warns us against this in chapter 18. He says, whoever isolates himself seeks his own desire. I cut people off so that I could do what I wanted to do. He breaks out against all sound judgment. A fool takes no pleasure in understanding, but only in expressing his opinion. Does that feel like the last year and a half of our world? We've isolated and created gaps between us and the people around us. And not only have we isolated from people that are different than us, but we've begun to insulate with the people who sound and act just like us. And we have become picky and choosy about who we allow into our inner circle, but in an unhealthy way. And the only advice we're hearing are those who go along with what we already thought or felt. Isn't that what your social media pages look like right now? A bunch of yelling of insulated people who have isolated from the very voices that they need to hear, and we need to learn to listen. In fact, when we isolate and when we insulate with only certain kinds of people, we become more chaotic and foolish. Is that our world right now? Does it feel more chaotic and foolish than it's felt in a very long time? Then we have to make a change. We have to open our ears. We have to listen to one another. We have to allow people access to the inner parts of us that don't just think and act like us, because then they're just recreating the same system you're already in, and those blind spots are just gonna continue. We need to open our ears to hear the words that maybe we've been pushing out for so long. And it's gonna require a little bit of us to re-engage in relationships. We have to listen. And it's hard, especially when it feels good when all the people around us like all of our posts because they all agree with us. It feels good when everybody sounds and acts like us because then they like you and you feel like you fit in. But why settle for likes when you can experience love, real love, challenging love, difficult love? Are you ready to listen? As you start listening, you're going to discover the next step is not so easy. As we allow people's voices to enter into our world, we're going to experience some growing pains. And that's part of how this happens, right? The next step is to invite honesty into our life. If we're listening well, then we're actively saying, hey, I need to hear from you because I think I have a blind spot in this area of my life. Hey, I need you to speak into my life. Hey, I need you to enter into deeper layers of my world. And we begin to invite people closer to who we are. But I'm not going to lie to you, when we do that, we put ourselves at risk because love is risky. As we open up who we are, we're giving people access to the parts of us that they could destroy. And we know this because part of the reason we're closed off now is because of wounds we've experienced in our past. And it is risky. But Solomon is going to prove this point that as we experience some of that pain, as we see this, pain is part of the process. And so we need to have people there. We need to have people so close that it hurts sometimes. And yes, it means sometimes people are gonna fail you. People are going to miss your expectations. Yes, you're going to fail them and miss their expectations, but we have to invite that honesty in, that openness, that vulnerability. In fact, it says it this way in Proverbs 27, verse 5, it says, better is open rebuke than hidden love. Better is it for someone to look you in the face and say, what are you doing? Than for someone to love you from afar and never tell you. Faithful are the wounds of a friend. Profuse are the kisses of an enemy. Let me just read that again. This is big. Faithful are the wounds of a friend. Profuse are the kisses of an enemy. Faithful are the wounds of a friend. Faithful are those who are close enough to you that they can hurt you. Faithful are the words of those who love you enough that they're so close that sometimes there's some pain that comes with it. In fact, the word wound throughout the book of Proverbs is used kind of as this dual meaning. On one hand, these wounds are when someone speaks up and says, hey, I see that behavior you're doing and it's not so good and I love you enough to call you out for it. And it hurts a little. It stings. We just got called out. And that's important. That discipleship, that discipline is important to allow someone close enough that they're able to invite that honesty and that truth. But on the other hand of wound, it means you just got hurt. When we allow people that close, they can say and do things that hurt more than what most people can do. But to Solomon, he says, it is better for you to have people so close that it hurts. It means you've allowed people to have access to you. And you should celebrate that even when it hurts. Because the kisses of an enemy mean nothing. The likes on social media, the fluff that people give you, the false praise, the I have my own agenda attached to this kind of compliments that they're giving you, those mean nothing and they do nothing for you. It is better for you to give access to the deeper layers of who you are, even if it hurts. We need people in that space. You know, Kelly, at some point, you knew that something was gonna happen, right? She had these friends at the magic shop and with her fanny pack and fake accent, for a long time, she just kept going back and the story just kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And you knew, like I was just watching this train wreck happen. She was either going to have to just cut them off or she was going to have to directly address and be like, so this is what's really happening, and invite some honesty into her life. Well, she opted to kind of just ghost the situation and just disappear from this group, which probably was the right decision at this stage in her life. But she learned a valuable lesson that day, which was it is way more beneficial to have people so close they see you, because then they can actually love you. Those guys were never going to be able to give her the kind of love she desperately needed. The cool thing was, a year and a half later, I'm sitting at her graduation, surrounded by her closest friends and her small group from church, and her cheer section was loud and excited and bold, and when her name got called, we all leapt for joy. But what really came to fruition for her was every single person that was sitting in that stands knew her. They knew that her mom had been sick since the day she was born and hadn't gotten out of bed in years. They knew that her dad was working so hard to just take care of the family that he was emotionally unavailable to her, and that was hard for her. We all knew that she was an only child and she so desperately just wanted to be loved by a sibling and have someone to hang out with. We knew that on her worst of days, she was a little selfish. She wanted it her way. We knew every facet of who she was, and at her cheering moment, she knew that every voice that was raised loved her for who she was. When we stop pretending, when we stop putting on the fanny pack and the fake accent, when we start actually being who we are, then people have an opportunity to truly love us. But it means we have to invite that honesty into our life. It means we have to be real about where we are. And it's hard, and it means people see things we don't want to see, and it means we're going to get hurt sometimes, but it's worth it. And the cool thing for her is it wasn't too late. I think at some points we think it's too late for me to have that kind of friendship, or I've been too hurt in the past. It's not too late. You can have that. But it means inviting that honesty in. It means saying, I'm willing to put down this identity to become who I actually am and see the kinds of people that will stick with me. You know, last week, we invited all of us to kind of take a look at the layers of our life, the things that are inside that are covering some insecurity. Look at what's going on in the deeper levels that we don't acknowledge a whole lot, and give access to God on those parts of our life and not hide from them. This week, keep doing that. Keep doing some work to unpack what's behind the mask. Keep doing the work to see what's really going on. But there's another step we need to add. Don't move. It is going to be really tempting when you start to unload some of the truth about your life, when you start to open up to the people closest to you, when you start giving access to those deeper layers. It's going to be really tempting to run or to isolate or to insulate or to hide or to reject people and just live in your own little bubble. It is going to be really tempting because you just opened up the part of you that can most easily be hurt. It is going to be tempting to shut that door and make a joke and run out of the room. Stay put. Let them invest in you. Let them see you. Let them know you. Don't retreat yet. Stay put. Because that's where growth happens. And it's not too late for you. It's not too late for you to have access to that kind of relationship. It's going to hurt sometimes, but don't move. Because why settle for likes when you can experience love? Don't you want that? For me, I moved here 3 years ago, and I'm not super great at this whole relationship thing. I've kind of just cut people off and moved to the next season of my life a couple times now, and just kind of dropped people the moment that they get too close. Well, 3 years ago when I moved here, I made a decision that I was going to stay put. I was going to stay put in my relationships, and I was going to give access to my heart to some people that I trusted, that I was choosing wisely who could enter into that space. And while I'm not perfect at it, and I have a long way to go, and it's going to be a lifetime of learning how to let myself be loved, I've also seen myself grow because it's not too late for me. In fact, over the course of the last month, I can pinpoint moments that I go, wow, I have grown. One of them, about a month ago, I was sitting in the office across from one of my friends, and we were talking about ministry and life, and he says, Kelsey, I need to be honest with you. And he starts pointing out these areas of my life that I needed to work on, some areas of my life that were impacting me and the people around me. And I stayed put, and I listened, and I took it in. And it was hard, but it was good for me, and I see it now. And then, just this last week, we do a run through where we practice things from the stage, and the staff gets to kind of add some input or some thoughts. And I walk off the stage, and one of my friends calls me over, and she says, hey, Kelsey, I need you to know you're better at this than you think you are. And I felt myself, like in that moment, literally backing away from her, and I had to stop myself and pull back in and just listen, because I had given her access to parts of my heart where she knew how insecure I can be about teaching, about being on stage, and how much I don't always feel like I'm worthy of this space, and that it could always be better, and I could just tweak it a little bit more. And she just looked at me and she spoke encouragement into my life. And it's scary because it means she's close enough that she could hurt, but I stayed put. It's not too late for you to have those kinds of relationships. People that call you out and encourage you in the same breath. People that love you because they know you and they have access to the inner parts of you. In fact, that's what Jesus came to bring, is those kinds of relationships, those kinds of connections. Jesus lived for years with some best friends, and he showed us what it looks like to do life with people. And then as he's getting ready to go and die on a cross for us, he turns to his closest friends and he gives them advice. Some of his last words in John 15, he said, "This is my commandment, that you love one another as I have loved you. Greater love has no one than this, that someone lay down his life for his friends." Jesus came onto the scene to say love. Love truly. Be seen and love in a way that you're willing to fight for one another, that you're willing to die for one another. Jesus came to die for us as friends so that we can join alongside of one another and step into something beautiful and amazing together. In fact, that's one of the hopes here at Eastern Hills, is that we can join arms and become the kind of community that lives out this kind of love that Jesus sacrificed everything for. In fact, if you're like, I want that kind of community, I just need to know where to find some of those people. If you go to ehills.org/weekend, you can click the weekend resources button, and there's a section in there that talks about places you can connect to people. Men's groups, women's groups, teenage groups, whatever it is, join one. and start to slowly let some trusted, wise counsel into your life, because this can be the kind of place that has that kind of love where you can be seen and known and loved truly for who you are, and you don't have to wear that mask that you've become an expert at wearing over the last decade. Find the meaningful community here where people see you at your worst and they won't leave you. People will see you at your brokenness and they will still want you. Where people will see your insecurities that you don't even acknowledge and they will still choose you. And the fun part, where you will see people in their mess and you'll still fight for them too. That's what Jesus came to bring. The kind of community that takes care of one another and sees one another and fights for one another. But it means we need to remove some of these layers and allow people to start having access. We gotta have access to the honesty, to the vulnerability. We need to be ready to listen and come alongside one another and cheer each other on, knowing every part of one another. And it's not too late for you. You can still have that today, and it's a risk. But that's what Jesus came to bring for you. Are you ready? Let me pray for us. God, thank you. Thank you that you didn't ask us to do life alone, that you didn't ask us to just kind of tough it out, but instead you surrounded us with people who, while it's scary, can love us as us. Love us at our best and love us at our worst. God, thank you for surrounding us with the kinds of people who can carry some of the burdens with us. God, will you help us find the right people? Will you help us become the right people for others? And will you help us take the risk to let people in, even when it hurts, even when it's scary, and even when it's easier to hide? God, thank you. Thank you for building us into community. In your name we pray. Amen.